Welcome to Tales from the Bridge. John Scalzi joins us for this episode, and as usual, he's hilarious. He's so much fun to talk with. We really hope you enjoy this one. John's latest novel, The Kaiju Preservation Society, is now out. You can order that. Go pick it up at your local store. It's pretty much everywhere at this point. So, we talk about a lot more than just books with John here. We really hope you enjoy it. Let's make our way over to the bridge. Welcome to the show. We are here with John Scalzi. You likely know his work. He has so many amazing books, from Old Man's War to Android's Dream, the Lock-In series, the Interdependency series, the Dispatcher series, and standalones like Fuzzy Nation, which I'm going to read soon. That just seems like a lot of fun. Red Shirts, which won the Hugo. Nice. And John's latest, which is the Kaiju Preservation Society. And I have just finished this, and it's a great read, a lot of fun. Also, check out John's Twitter, Facebook, and his website. I believe you can just go scalzi.com or whatever.scalzi.com, and you're going to get all kinds of cool stuff on there. John is very active on social media, and he's a lot of fun. You won't be disappointed. Even if you're not a big reader into science fiction, you're going to have a lot of fun with just John because he's a very cool guy. So, John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here.
Yeah, awesome. I want to start things off a little bit differently and not just jump right into books and writing.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I saw what I would say was the second best concert of all time on, I think it would have been VHS. Stop Making Sense. Now, so yeah, go there.
No. Here's the thing is that I don't know if it's the best concert ever, right? It is, I would argue, if not the best concert film, then certainly one of the top 5. And the thing is like when it came out, Jonathan Demme directed it, and it came out in like 83 or 84, something like that. Hands down, best concert film of the 80s. I'm perfectly comfortable making that argument. It's been some time since it came out, something like 35 years. So it's possible that there has been a better concert film since, and lots of people will argue this one way or the other. But ultimately, it's still one of the best concert films ever. And, you know, as a lover of music and as a former film critic, I could literally fill up this entire show with all of the reasons why this is. And if you want me to, I absolutely will. We don't even have to talk about that.
Well, we'll leave a little bit of room here. But for anyone who hasn't seen Stop Making Sense by the Talking Heads, it's a fantastic concert video. And I mean, if you want to exercise, but you hate exercise, just watch it. Yeah. You'll feel like you had a cardio workout. I can't believe how much David moves in that. But I'm curious to know, where's The Last Waltz on this list then, if you were to kind of set them next to each other?
It's really interesting because here's the thing about The Last Waltz, which is absolutely a terrific film. But one of the things that I really like about Stop Making Sense over so many concert films or band films or band documentaries is that Stop Making Sense is pure concert, right? It gets in, it starts you right at the beginning where it's just, why am I blanking on his name? Because I'm David Byrne. It's David Byrne on stage with a guitar and a boombox. And then as the songs go on, more and more of the band comes on the stage, and then it becomes the full-blown concert and all this stuff. There's no backstage stuff. There's no, documentary about how the band got together, no talking about the Rhode Island school design or whatever it was. It's just the experience of the concert, masterfully shot by Jonathan Demme. By contrast, you have something like The Last Waltz, which is literally supposed to be the last concert of the band. and they just do the whole, they have the inserts where the band members are talking. They have the thing where, they do all the cuts of people coming on stage, going off stage, doing all that sort of stuff. It's a different dynamic and it's a different sort of feel. And it's not to say that, The Last Waltz isn't terrific, because obviously it is. It is one of the best concert films, but it is manifestly a different take on what the concept of the concert film is. And I think that's one of the reasons why Stop Making Sense really does stand out. The only context of the band is the concert itself. You're not giving any other context other than, here's David Byrne coming on the stage with a boombox and a guitar, and they're off. You either come into it already having known who the Talking Heads were and loving them, or you come out of it going, holy shit, that's the Talking Heads. I need to find out more about them. So that's kind of the difference there.
And obviously the band being, The Last Waltz being kind of like a super band, one of the first that we had seen, right? This concert where we just see so many legendary people on stage together. It is hard to compare, isn't it? But I guess they both would have been, I believe, within 10 years. I believe it would have been mid 70s, wasn't it? That Scorsese did that.
Yeah, it's. I think that's right. It's definitely a 70s film. It has all the feelings of the 70s film. And by the same token, Stop Making Sense is very much an 80s film as well. So they are very much of their time. I think it's really interesting because it is kind of fun to track, where band members and stuff like that go from those particular movies. I mean, one of my favorite albums of the late 80s was actually Robbie Robertson's solo album that came out in like 89, which was produced by another great Canadian, Daniel Lanois. And it was, and I actually went into the band moving backwards. The reason that I had listened to Robbie Robertson at all was because I was a Daniel Lanois fan because of the work that he'd done with Peter Gabriel and with U2. So I was working backwards through the producer. That's the kind of nerd I am. And then found Robbie Robertson, and through Robbie Robertson, moving backwards through his history to find the band and all the stuff that came out of that as well. So it's really interesting how people find music and find the things that are really important to them. There's no one way to get into these things.
Mm-hmm. I got to be honest, I got chills when you mentioned Robbie Robertson's solo album, because it's kind of obscure, and it really has a Peter Gabriel-ish production to it, the Daniel Lanois. But it's so huge, and it's got indigenous sounds and percussion and vocals, and it's gorgeous. So anyone want to check out them? That's a good one.
Yeah, it's not just Daniel Lanois, though. I mean, it's like so many Daniel Lanois collaborators on them. The drummer from Manu Katché, is on the Robbie Robertson album. Obviously, U2 is in there with Sweet Fire of Love, which sounds like a U2 song with Robbie Robertson on it. And so it's just, again, very much of the time. And, of course, Daniel Lanois, not only one of my favorite producers, but also one of my favorite musicians. He came out with a solo album right around the same time called AKD, which was just genuinely terrific. So it's just, the whole atmosphere of it is wonderful. And again, so much of, I think Robbie Robertson is Canadian, right? So it's not just like a secretly Canadian thing. He is actually Canadian. Daniel Lanois is Canadian. The whole Canadian thing goes full on right there.
Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the birth of overproducing an album too, or some people would say it's so overproduced, but they're so warm. One of my favorites from Gabriel is Up.
Right.
And that one doesn't get recognized as much because there's not really a single on that one. But actually, just to call back to Peter again, we nerded out on that album because he's a fan of that one as well.
Sure.
There's a lot of good tracks, and the production there, it goes back to about the late 80s when they really started the production value just increased, and you get these huge sounds, and that Robbie Robertson solo is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think part of the production ethos of the time really was, just so much headroom, so much echo, so much that going on to really take advantage of the capabilities of digital audio, and not just to show the pristine clarity of it, but to be able to take advantage of what it could do. Now, there's going to be a lot of people who, especially these days when vinyl's made such a big comeback, they're like, well, I miss the warmth and so on and so forth. And it's like, it's not so much the warmth, it's just the production ethos of the time. And it can absolutely be overdone, right? And just as, anything can be overdone. I mean, in the early 2000s, all the music sounded like crap because they really overdid the compression, and they just made everything in a really tiny little band, right? And that was almost a reaction against, so much of 80s production, where you could hear the little tinkles and, all the echoes and the reverbs and the, resonance and the infinite guitars and so on and so forth. So, yeah. I bet you didn't know we were going to go here for this conversation.
We knew. Yeah, he warned us. You can tell he's the music guy in the group, though. So we're going to just let him have his moment.
Yeah, we've gone weirder places with him. It's okay.
Sure.
Well, John's got a lot of cool guitars, and so when you got a bunch of cool guitar, if you have a 3-neck guitar, you probably like music.
Oh yeah.
So
it's 6 necks actually.
Oh really?
Yeah, so I've got a 6-neck guitar. It's called the Beast.
Wow.
So how many 6-string guitars on there then? And are there 7 and 8 string or?
So here's how it plays out. It's got in order from left to right when you're looking at it. It's got a 12-string guitar. It's got a 6-string regular 6-string with a Floyd Rose tremolo on it. It's got a 5-string bass. It's got a 4-string bass. It's got a 7-string also with a Floyd Rose tremolo on it. And then it's got another 6-string, but I've had that strung as a baritone. So, and it was hysterical because I got it, basically I built a music room down in my basement this year, and I basically got it as a conversation piece and art, but it is an actual functional guitar. You can, in fact, play it. And when I got it, on a per neck basis, it was very affordable. I took it into my local music place to have them, clean it up and restring it and do all that sort of stuff. And after they were done being, why are you bringing this into our place? They got really excited about it. And when I got it back from them, they were like, just so you know, this is an amazing piece of guitar work. Also, we would have done things differently because the way that it's put together, all the necks are active at one time, right? Mm-hmm. So you could literally play all of them at once and they would all play through. And on one hand, that's really amazing. On the other hand, why would you do that? You would want to actually be able to isolate, each of the individual guitars. And the answer to that is the guy who made it, it's playable, but he actually did make it as a conversation piece as opposed to, you're going to go out on stage and you're going to have the whole band, actually play, the 6-string and the bass and the baritone all at the same time. So, but I do love music. I was a music critic for many, many years. And then, especially, in the 90s, which is, my era. And then since then, just try to keep a hand in and play some music.
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. You've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune in to 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
There we have it.
There we go. All right.
Everybody, good night.
I do have a book question.
Okay.
If we could do that, if we're
Yeah.
doing
I
that,
don't know, guys.
No,
I
it's
don't know.
okay.
What-
Like,
we can-
I mean, if we must promote the thing that actually feeds me, let's do that.
Well, so you've got, Old Man's War, which is military sci-fi,
Sure.
and then you moved. I mean, a lot of projects happened, after that, small short stories and that sort of thing, and then you moved into space opera with the interdependency, and kaiju feels funnier, and there's short stories that feel funnier. So I get the sense that that humor is sort of natural to you, even just talking to you now. Like if you could just write one thing, or were only allowed to write one thing, what would it be? Military sci-fi or the big space opera stuff, or would you stick to the humor?
I mean, if I was only going to be able to write one thing, I would probably just write opinion pieces, right? Because that's actually how I got my start. I was a journalist, and so I was a professional critic for many years, and then I was an opinion columnist. So, as I like to say, I spent my 20s being a professional mansplainer, and kind of got over that. But the point about it that's actually really great about science fiction, which I think is coming to your point, is that science fiction has definite rules. It's supposed to be speculation. It's supposed to have, a rational basis for the things that happen in it, but it's still meant to be, prognosticating and moving beyond what we already know into things that are plausible beyond that. But within that context, you can literally write almost anything. We write military science fiction with Old Man's War and that series. Can write space opera with, the interdependency. I can write near future fiction with the Lock-In series. And that is, neither military science fiction or, space opera. I can write humor and sort of meta-cultural observation, which is what Red Shirts is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can do basically what kaiju is, which is, this sort of funny, like this is happening now, alternate, kind of universe sort of thing. There's so much that you can do within the realm of science fiction. You don't feel bounded. And I'll tell you a story, which is one of my famous stories, is like when I decided in my 20s that I was going to try to write a novel. I couldn't decide between writing science fiction or writing like mystery / crime fiction, which is the other thing that I read a lot of for fun, and so that I was familiar enough with that I figured I could do it. So I literally flipped a coin, right? And if it came up heads, I was going to write science fiction. If it came up tails, I would write, mystery, thriller, crime fiction sort of thing. And it came up heads. So that's what I ended up doing. I ended up writing science fiction. One of the things that I'm really happy about that, aside that it's worked out very well for me in a general sort of sense, is that science fiction is broad enough that I can write mysteries, which is what the Lock-In series is, or the Dispatcher series. I can write noir, which is, again, what the Dispatcher series is. I can write farce. You can do all of those things and still have it be science fiction. So science fiction is incredibly broad, being able to write only one type of thing. So that's kind of my answer there.
Well, maybe I could follow up to that, if you don't mind, Sam. Science fiction has changed a lot, right? In the last 10, 20 years, especially. It seems to have sort of become this bigger and bigger and bigger umbrella, right? That's including more and more, and it's very inclusive. It has all these subgenres. It's now like mainstream in a way I think it probably wasn't when we were reading as kids. Do you want to comment about that? What's your experience of like having, become a successful science fiction author in this particular era of science fiction?
Well, I think you are absolutely correct that science fiction has actually really mainstreamed, and I notice it. I mean, not only by the fact that you see so much more of it, but also in the fact of you look at the New York Times bestseller list, and there are more science fiction books in the last few years that have been on the bestseller list than I think pretty much any time in history before this. And when science fiction used to get on the list, it would generally be either media tie-in, so Star Wars particularly, but other things as well. And that's absolutely not a crack at media tie-in. It's really hard to do media tie-in. It's hard to do it well, and the people who are really good at it are really good writers. Or it was the classic writers like Herbert or Asimov or Heinlein, right? That they had been there for so long that it was that they got there in part because they were so well established. But now you have folks like Martha Wells, who has been doing science fiction for years and years and years and years and years, and has broken through with Murderbot. You have Nora Jemisin and her Broken Earth series. I think a couple of things have happened. When we talk about science fiction mainstreaming, we are actually talking about science fiction literature mainstreaming as opposed to science fiction in other fields. Like, it's been a huge success in film and television and video games for years and years and years and years.
Right.
But the literature of it for many years was very much of I don't want to be seen on the bus reading science fiction because the cover is ridiculous or whatever. And a couple of things happened. One, the mainstreaming of science fiction through the other media, right? Through film and TV and video games, sort of lifted all boats. But the other thing is that I do actually think the diversification of authors and the diversification of subjects and the diversification of multiple subgenres really made a difference in terms of how science fiction was being approached. Up until the early 2000s, it really was a straight white man's field. And there were occasional other people who broke through in the field and were successes in the field, but they were the exceptions more than the rule. But all the people who were not being represented as writers in the field were reading it. They were taking it into their person. They were filtering it through their own, experiences and so on and so forth. And so in the 21st century, so many of them are, coming in and breaking out in the field and doing science fiction their way. They're not apologizing for it. They're not, trying to be like, oh, we're here now too. And this is like, no, we're here, and they're absolutely unapologetic for it. And they are remapping what science fiction is. Now, to be clear, he said, as a straight white man, there is more than enough space for straight white dudes to continue to be writing science fiction. And lots of us are still here and lots of us are still doing well. But the field has changed. The competition is changed, and the competition is much tougher now than it has been in years before. I will argue endlessly to anyone that the golden age of science fiction, and no disrespect to Asimov, Bradbury, Heinlein and Clark, but the golden age of science fiction is now, because the explosion of different viewpoints and the diversity of stories that are being told, and the success of people who were not otherwise represented in the field right now is huge. And they're bringing in influences from outside of the field, from places that science fiction readers wouldn't have necessarily read before. And so we are getting science fiction that is a synthesis of what has come before in the field, but these new influences as well. So we are getting science fiction that we have literally never read before, from Nora Jemisin, from Rebecca Roanhouse, from Charlie Jane Anders, from Tochi Ababuchi, all these folks who are saying new and exciting things with science fiction that we didn't even know were, to be said before. I love it. I mean, I love the fact that my peer group and the group of writers who's coming up after my peer group are just so damn good. And it makes a difference in terms of, not in the sense of me going, oh no, now the competition stuff, I have to be even better. But I'm inspired by the what I'm reading. It's so good. I want to be as good to, to honor the level of the field as it exists today. So, I'm not going to say that, what I'm writing is, necessarily, I'm off doing my own thing, and I think at a level that reflects the level of other people that I'm working within my peer group. I really love it. I think it's the best time to be reading science fiction.
Well, it broadens the audience, right? When more people have access to a genre, more people are reading, more people are coming into it. So, I imagine it would feel more competitive in a sense, but I could see your point where it's like there's just more people accessing this genre now, because I don't know that any other genre so readily avails itself as a vehicle for social change, for someone coming in to represent their community in the world that they build, because they don't have to, write an alt fiction or something like that, or an alt history to change and reconstruct what's here, or they can create it from scratch and normalize their community on a galactic scale, which is pretty amazing. Like for me, that's a key attraction to this genre. And I think I agree completely. Like, this is a golden age for sci-fi. It's not just like, dudes in their basements anymore, like that. I feel like,
Well, here's the thing about it is, and well, when we talk about competition and we talk about all this sort of stuff, the thing to remember, and I think a thing that often gets lost by the people who look around and go, what the hell has happened to science fiction in the last 20 years? It's not a zero-sum game, right? The field expands, and when the field expands, not only does that bring in new readers, but it brings in new opportunities. It's I basically came in, I think, at I don't want to call it the last gasp of the white dudes, but definitely there was a turning of the page, so to speak, in terms of representation in the genre right around the time that I came in. And the thing about it is the type of science fiction that I write, the type of science fiction that existed prior to when I came in, it's still there. It's still selling. It's doing just fine. But it is just one theme in a larger symphony of themes, right? That science fiction has now. It's no longer just, one type of music. It is all these other different types of music under a large umbrella. And so as far as it goes, nobody has been disadvantaged by the expansion of the field. And to my feeling about it, what this means for me is more people are reading science fiction, more opportunities for me to get readers that I would not have otherwise had not the field diversified to such an extent that it has. I owe readers to Nora Jemisin, to Rebecca Rowanhouse, to Charlie Jane Anders, to Mary Robinette Cole, just as much as I owe them to Heinlein and Clark and Bradbury and so on.
I think it was Elizabeth Bear, possibly Shonen McGuire, when we talked to her. She said this isn't the golden age of science fiction; it's the rainbow age of science fiction. Right, that bringing all these different voices together right now is sort of very unique and special and new.
Yeah, no, and I think Shonen is very wise in that respect. That we do have more, right? Yeah. It's a much wider palette of stuff that we get to read and experience, and it's not just the writers, by the way. One of the things that I want to bring to people over and over again is that part of the reason that we are getting the voices that we are getting is not just because of the writers, but because of the editors, the people who are acquiring the stuff, particularly in mainstream science fiction publishing, right? They are a much more diverse field of editors than there has ever been before, and they didn't necessarily grow up with the genre as it had been understood before. A lot of them came in from elsewhere. A lot of them grew up reading romance. A lot of them grew up in fan fiction. A lot of them grew up reading YA. A lot of them are queer and not non-binary and not white. So as far as it goes, when they go looking to acquire, they're not necessarily looking for just what has worked before, but what they know speaks to them. And when they do that, what they find is that the audiences, that they are a representative of an audience that existed, that had been underserved before, right? So when we bring out books that are queer and BIPOC and all these other perspectives that we haven't seen, the audience is there. It's just been underserved. And now it's been expanded because they're like, I can read stories that speak to me and yet still have universality to them. So so it's not just the writers, it's the industry as well. It's still, it's still perfectly fine out there for the white dudes again. But the door has been opened wider.
Well, I think it's also something unique about science fiction is the community, right? The fans. It is a unique community. I mean, I don't think mystery novels have the same kind of community backing them. We went to a fan expo this year, right? And there's all these people are showing up in costumes, and the fans are writing fan fiction, and it's a very inclusive environment, and everybody's sort of pushing the envelope. I mean, I just think it's an amazing community to write for, like you said, right? That this audience was already here and it's been primed, and it's just hungry, right? It's hungry for more and more, and we're getting it. I
think this is the advantage of genre because, I mean, I think you're right that science fiction has the built-in community and always has, leading all the way back to, the very first fans who started, corresponding with each other in the pages of Hugo Gernsback's magazines, right? That's how fandom started and how we got the conventions and so on and so forth. But I do want to push back on the idea that it's exclusive to science fiction. I think that other genre fields have that same sort of thing. Mystery does have it to an extent. Horror definitely does. Romance. Oh my God, romance. Aside from being the largest single segment of publishing and basically the economic engine of publishing in general, it's just a huge community in and of itself. And there's overlaps in all of these to what's going on in science fiction. Science fiction in many ways developed the template for community, but it's far from the only community at this point. And I think also what you're seeing is you are beginning to see a lot of convergence of a lot of this stuff in things like, the big media conventions, right? The ones that have 80,000, 100,000 people. There is a huge speculative, overlay to all of that because that's where the most fun is for the cosplay, and where all the great tchotchkes come from. But at the same time, more and more is getting sort of subsumed into what what could overall be called nerd culture now. Nerd culture is not only confined to science fiction and fantasy, but so many things that used to just be their own little niche, and now they're sort of all coming together. I don't want to say an amorphous glob, but certainly a thing that becomes, that threatens to become unwieldy and eat all of culture.
In terms of your writing, are there trends or ideas or conversations that are happening right now that you find engaging, that are maybe inspiring your next stories and the path that you see yourself taking going forward?
That's kind of a tough one because I think so much of what I do is mostly just me sitting in a room going, well, what's going to amuse me, right? I am sort of my own favorite audience, and my own first reader, and I get and if I'm immediately bored by something, then I know I'm in trouble because I'm super. I'm easily distractible and I'm very unforgiving. Like there are so many books that I'll pick up and I'll put them down in the first 20 pages, but they're like, nope, you've completely lost me. Nope, you're not amusing me fast enough. Nope. And so that kind of works to the same extent with what I'm doing and what I'm writing. I read a lot of science fiction and fantasy and speculative stuff, but I mostly read it as a reader. The stuff that I read that sort of nourishes me is not stuff that I want to necessarily respond to as a writer. Not because it doesn't merit a response, because I think that it does, but not that I'm not necessarily the person to respond to it. Most of the stuff that I like to read is not stuff that is much like what I write, right? I like to read the stuff that right now, especially, that is just coming in completely, orthogonal to what it is that I'm doing, simply so I can just see what's going on, in the field and how other people are responding to it. And like I said, when I write, I want my stuff to be of that quality. But it's not necessarily translating into, I have to respond to Nora Jemisin. It's like, no, Nora's going to do her thing. I'm going to do my thing. I just want to make sure that when my thing comes out, that it's within hailing distance of the awesomeness that is Nora's work, as one example. So no, mostly what it is me just coming up with what is it that I want to write about, that I want to see that I want to see exist in this sphere that I don't currently see existing in this sphere. And so that is not necessarily an immediate response to what else is being done. It sometimes just comes in completely from left field, and sometimes it's just me being frustrated somebody else hasn't written it. Red Shirts was a perfect example of that, right? Red Shirts was, all of science fiction knew what Red Shirts was, or what a red shirt was. Everybody up to that point had just been like, yeah, it's a 5-minute joke. You're going down to the surface of the planet with Scotty and Kirk and Spock. Guess we'll see you later, Ensign Jones. Right? Everybody got the joke.
Yeah.
But I was like, does nobody see the pathos that's actually here of people realizing that they're doomed and trying to fight against it? And the answer was like, nobody had done this. Nobody had done this absolutely low-hanging fruit in a way that I thought it ought to have been done by that point. And I was like, well, if nobody else is going to take this absolutely low-hanging fruit, I'm going to take it and I'm going to write it. And to some extent, the new book, Kaiju, is very much like that. It's like that it literally was, we have the World Wildlife Foundation. What if we had the World Wildlife Foundation for Godzilla, right? Save the kaiju, right? And most people wouldn't be thinking, why would you need to save the kaiju? They're 200 meters large and they eat Tokyo for breakfast, right? Why would they need to be saved? And therein lies the tale.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because in Red Shirts, it's the officers and the low rank and file are upset that they're being seen as expendable. In Old Man's War, there's a bit of that too. I was in the mid '90s. I spent a short time in the U.S. Navy and felt that deeply. And I thought you've captured that sense of what people who never otherwise speak to one another are suddenly crammed together on a boat and have to find a way to get along. You captured that really well. Is that from personal experience or people that you've talked to, or in terms of your research process? Like, how do you find a way to capture that so well?
I mean, as it happens, I have family who was in the Navy as well, and also particularly in submarines, right? And so, you imagine, literally months underwater in a tube with 120 other dudes, right? and you're sleeping next to a missile tube, and you actually, how are you going to make that work? So there is some acknowledgement of the people that I know talking about their own life experiences and what that was like. But a lot of it was also, as you say, it's just research, finding out how people who have been in that situation have responded to it, what they have written about it, how they have made it work. And then part of the job as a fiction writer is to take the things that you don't necessarily have the life experience for. I've never been on a submarine, aside from, a Disney ride. But taking that and then making it sound reasonable, not only to the general audience, but for the people who have been part of that as well. So, that's the gig. That's the job.
Yeah. I think it comes down to a lot of social awareness on your part too, because your work, without a doubt, your books have more dialogue than I can really think of anything I've read in the last few years.
Sure.
They're just heavy in dialogue. And you get to know the characters more. You even drive the story with dialogue.
Yeah.
So you've got this, you're a natural social butterfly, as they say. I'm sure you hear that, but just the way that you captivate people on your social media seems like you just have a good understanding of how people work, how people think. And that's how you're able to write good dialogue, because you would think, well, dialogue, how do you take the story further with dialogue so often? Well, you do it properly, and you really show those characters and who they are and what they're thinking. Sure. And you do that very well.
I mean, one, thank you. I really appreciate that. I think there are a couple things going on there. I think every writer gets certain things sort of quote unquote for free. And dialogue is one of the things that I get for free. I think humor is another one, which ties in very well for dialogue. But one of the other things that really helped to make my stuff so dialogue heavy, honestly, was the fact that I was a movie critic literally for years and years and years. And when you review like 7 to 10 movies a week for years on end, one, you get used to the cinematic storytelling style. And one of the big elements of storytelling in films is dialogue. So much gets told by how people are responding to each other, what they are saying, how they're saying it, when they are dropping clues, and so on and so forth. Now, the important thing to remember about dialogue, and I say this often, and I will no doubt say it again, is dialogue is not really speech. It is a mode of exposition that mimics speech in order to tell story. It's much more efficient than speech is. Anybody who's listened to a podcast knows how much, fumbling and uhs and ahs and stuff like that, unless you go and you edit them out, that exist when people are just talking extemporaneously. Whereas in dialogue, everything sort of has a purpose. But yeah, when you tell the story through dialogue, it's revealing it through one character talking to each other, which reveals character as well. And it all sort of fades into each other. And I find it a really efficient way to tell a story, not only because it's super easy for people to internalize as opposed to blocks and blocks and blocks of expository text, but also it does the service of giving your readers a chance to spend time with characters that exposition wouldn't otherwise do it. Now, to be fair, there is sometimes a criticism of my writing that all my characters are quippy and all my characters are smartasses. And, I plead guilty to that, in part because, it's a novel. I don't want them to be boring when they talk to each other, in part because I'm imparting so much story by means of dialogue that I want to keep it bang, 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 moving along. But I can absolutely see why people are like, they're all very quick on the trigger, aren't they? I'm like, yes, they are. There's a method to the madness. There's a reason that I do this. And a lot of that has to do with the structure of how I tell stories.
And it works. It's forgivable, but also lends itself to the screen well too, because
Yeah.
They're the only person that's not smart on TV or in a movie is playing the character that's not smart, and that's what they're doing. So
yeah, well,
it works.
Yeah, the thing that you have to do is you do try to do the what is it, the reader insert, right? The character who has things explained to them so that they can be, so that the reader can be clued in, and you have to be careful about how you do that, because you don't want just one character to just be like, hey, I am completely ignorant in everything, and yet I am absolutely key to everything that is going on. That's when you aren't playing nice with your readers. It's like, because then they'll be like, if you're so completely clueless, why does everybody defer to you, and why are you driving the story in the first place? You got to balance all these things.
And you've cross genres too. Like if anyone wants to catch some of your work on Netflix, they can watch Love, Death, and Robots, and you've got 3 short animated pieces on there. Is that right?
4. I just looked it up.
Yeah, 4 so far, and there'll be an additional one in the upcoming season as well.
And can I just say, those are amazing. Like, I didn't even know you'd written those. Those are some of my favorite shorts ever. Sam just dug that up. I'm like, what? He wrote the yogurt episode? Come on.
Yeah,
that's
the yogurt
so
episode.
Good.
Yeah. I will tell you a story about the yogurt, because I think you will find it amusing, which is that so I have a lot of stuff optioned because I have a lot of stuff, and they're always optioning, and I had optioned something else entirely, and I was talking to my friend Mary Robinette Cole about it, and I was like, oh, hey, this thing got optioned. She's like, of course it got optioned. All your stuff gets optioned except for the yogurt thing. That's never going to get optioned. And I was like, actually, and she's like, bullshit, you're lying to me. And I had to actually send her a screen cap of the actual Netflix option deal for that. And she's like, I hate you. But I have to say, with respect to Love, Death, and Robots, that it's been such a great experience, not only because just how cool is it that, a short story that I wrote about yogurt, has been seen by millions and millions of people. But also just because the experience of working with the folks at Blur Studios, who are the people who are actually producing it for Netflix, has been a dream. Tim Miller, who is the head of Blur, his team of people have all been wonderful. They have done a great job of, making me feel involved and engaged with it. And at every step of the process, they were like, here's what we're doing. What are your thoughts? Do you have any suggestions? All of this sort of stuff. And so when I finally saw, the first season, and then with the second season with automated customer service, just recognizing that it wasn't just me saying, here's my stuff, and they went, okay, we'll see you in, 2 years, but that it was an actual collaborative process, meant the world to me. It's one of the best experiences that I've had working in film and TV. So absolutely have been thrilled with what they've done, not just with my stuff, but with all the rest of the stuff too. It's been great. I'm super excited about the upcoming season, and I hope that Netflix finds it in their heart to give them another 10 seasons, because I would absolutely continue to keep working with the same people.
Amazing. Yeah. Automated customer service was one of my other favorites, though. That Roomba, man, that was hilarious. And now that I see that you've written it and I've read your stuff, I'm like, well, of course John Scalzi wrote that. And this his style.
Yeah, no, and that's the great thing, which is that, so I write the story, right? And then they give it, in the case of automated customer service, they give it to Meat Department, which are these folks in France who just did amazing things. They took what I did and expanded upon it and added so much to it, that what comes back is not just what I wrote, but is what they put in it as well. It's much more collaborative, and I think it's better than what I wrote, just by myself. And it ended up winning an Emmy for character design, which absolutely makes sense. And that was kind of cool because they won the Emmy, and I noted it on to them on Instagram. I'm like, congratulations on your Emmy. And they were like, what? Like they hadn't known. Right. So they were like, We didn't know until you told us, so thank you.
Wow, that's great. Wow. Did they add the old man with the shotgun, or was that yours already?
No, the old man with the shotgun, the specific characters, all of those things are actually them. What I had done is I had written a dialogue that was literally the automated customer service response, right?
Right, yeah.
So the character pressing 1 and 0 and 1, and cursing and so on and so forth is completely off stage, right? You are only hearing the automated customer responses, right? Or you're only reading the automated customer responses. And that's hilarious, actually. It's like I wrote it to go on tour with, like, I would do a reading, and that was one of the readings that I did. But the meat department came in and created a character of Jeanette, created a character of Bill, who was the neighbor, created the character of the dog, all of that sort of stuff. And this is what I mean by it's a collaborative process, because what I wrote was great, as a thing to read on stage to make people laugh, but you couldn't film it. You literally couldn't film it because it would just be a guy reading, right? So they had to crack the code and open it up. And so the things that you were responding to there, that's meat department. And that happened with them. That happened with, 3 Robots. It happened with Yogurt. It happened with the Alternate Histories one too, where the animation team and the crew, everyone else brought in so much and made them better.
Do you aspire to write for television or film specifically? Have you worked on any screenplays? Is this a direction you want to go at all? Or would you like to just keep doing what you're doing and allow someone else to collaborate on your work?
Well, I did do the screenplays for Automated Customer Service and for the upcoming, there's a sequel to the first 3 Robots in season 3, volume 3. And I wrote the screenplay for that as well. And I've enjoyed writing screenplays. I'd be happy to write more. The thing that I tell people, though, is, 6 years ago now, Tor gave me a 13-book contract, right? And they paid me quite a lot of money for that. So my job is writing novels. That is what I do. If I write screenplays, if I do other stuff like that, then that will be in addition to what my day job is. My day job is the novels. And that's fine, because the day job is what allows people to option stuff and to do other stuff. Like I said, I'm happy to write the screenplays, collaborate with people, but I'm equally happy for them to find a writer that they like and talk to that person. And again, to have them take what I've already written and adapt it to another medium. I actually had a very positive experience recently. I can't talk about it because everything is not, out in public yet. But a very recent, very collaborative project with another writer was adapting the work that I had done, and they were introducing new characters and new scenes and new events in order to adapt it for, another medium. And they sent me the script, and I can be very harsh in my comments, not because I'm a jerk, but because I'm like, look, I'm going to be very clear to you about what I'm thinking is working and what's not working, and all this sort of stuff. This person did such a good job that I only had one minor note, and I was super happy with what they did. And that says to me that there is some value in letting other people take a crack at what you've already done, particularly if they already have expertise in screenwriting. And second of all, in opening up what is essentially a individual exercise in writing novels and short stories, and opening it up to a collaborative process when it comes to film and TV, right? These things actually can, in the best case scenario, make what happens on film and TV richer and a better experience in film and TV than it would be otherwise, or if they just only adapted the book exactly, right? Everybody's like, oh, the book's always better. Sometimes the book isn't better. Sometimes the book is great, but the book should not be a movie or a TV show. A TV show or a movie should have allowances for that particular medium. So I'm open to writing more screenplays, but my day job is a novelist, and I really like working with people who are really good at what they do.
Is it common though for like people who particularly who are used to working in their processes generally as a novelist, which I imagine is pretty solitary? Is there sometimes a struggle to move into that collaborative environment?
I think it depends. I mean, I think a lot of it has to do with one's prior experience. I think, like before I was a novelist, right? I worked in journalism, and then I worked as a corporate consultant for various firms. And my job as a corporate consultant was to come in and produce to specification, which meant that I go in, I'm like, what is it you want? What is it you need? And who I am as a person was completely subsumed. You know, it wasn't about me. It wasn't about my wants or needs. It was fulfilling the needs of this financial services company that needed a mid-cap value stock brochure done in the next 10 days, right? And so in that sort of sense, I had training where I learned to push down my ego, and work with people who are like, we need you to do A, B, and C, and we need you to do it in this particular way because we are on a deadline. And if you do it right, then we'll pay you a ton of money and recommend you to all our friends. And if you do it wrong, then you'll never work in this town again, which, as it turns out, is perfect training for Hollywood. Now, again, the other thing is also you do have to understand that, like, if you take a book and you sell it to Hollywood, right? You have gone from being the god of that universe to just being one on the committee and not even the most important part of the committee, right? Mm-hmm. And depending on who they are, what they, it can range from they really want you involved to they really want you to go away. Like, they'll be like, here's all this money. And in exchange for all this money, you will never see this property again, right? And as long as the money is good and you're good with that, that's fine. But you have to be aware that that's part of the thing. If you don't want that aspect of it, then don't take Hollywood's money. It's really that simple. You have one power in film and TV or any other thing, and it's the power of no, right? Because once you say yes, then it gets complicated. So if you don't feel that you're going to be able to be collaborative, if you don't feel like somebody else can be trusted with your work, if you are worried that the book is going to be murdered in film and TV, then don't sell it. Just don't sell it. And it's perfectly fine. There have been so many excellent books that have never been translated onto the screen because the author knew themselves well enough to be like, no, I don't want to do that. But if you are going to do that, you do have to understand that just because you are competent as a novelist doesn't mean you're competent as a screenwriter, doesn't mean you're competent as a filmmaker, doesn't mean that you understand what the film market is at that particular moment, or that you know what it takes to have that film be a success, either creatively or commercially. The very first time I sold Old Man's War, because I've sold Old Man's War like multiple times at this point, I was having a conversation with one of the producers, and the producer was, being very solicitous of me, trying to handhold me about the fact that they were going to have to make some changes, right? And I was like, look, I'm going to say this to you once so we don't have to have this conversation again. But I said, look, I want you to make a movie that when people go to see it, they'll be like, okay, I understand that the changes have been made and that they had to have been made, but the feeling that I got from the movie is the same as the feeling that I got from the book. And overall, it's a quality production, right? I said, but if you can't do that, I want you to make a movie that makes a shit ton of money because then I will sell 2 million copies of my books and I won't care. right? like these are the options. Make it a good adaptation, or make it a hit. Hopefully both. But if you have to, these are the options. Don't do anything in the middle, right? One or the other.
Right.
And that's kind of been my guiding star since. It's like, I want you to do a good job, but if you can't do a good job, at least make it hugely, hugely popular, so I sell millions of my books. Is that too much to ask? No, I don't think so.
Well, I have to ask you, since we're talking about collaborations, about this book. You edited a compilation called Metatropolis.
Metatropolis,
which, has 5, I think, novellas or short stories in it. One by yourself, one by Carl Schroeder, who we talked to, one of the first people, a friend of Peter Watts, a friend of the show, another Canadian, that's right. And one of his best, and favorite, I think, novellas is in here. What is it? To High from Farasalinia, which is just a great name. I can't pronounce the name of your story, otherwise I would read it. It's in Latin, right?
Yeah, the English translate. I can't pronounce it either. So the English translation is Everything But the Squeal.
That's right. Yeah, and it involves amplified intelligence pigs using sex toys. That's the sort of part that stuck with me, anyway.
As you would,
Marty, get that to me as soon as you can, please.
Oh, yeah. And there's one by Elizabeth Barron here, who we've also talked to. So clearly now we have to talk to Jay Lake and Tobias Buckle, who we haven't talked to yet. But anyway, in the introduction, you sort of described this process that you undertook with these authors.
Sure.
Not just to sort of have a compilation based around a theme, but to actually build a world together.
Yes.
So tell us about that. That sounds awesome. It sounds really fun.
It was a lot of fun. I mean, so basically we got together, Jay, who has unfortunately passed on, Toby, Elizabeth Ebert, Carl. And what we did was, from the ground up, is like, look, we are going to have to build this world, but we're going to build a common world. We're going to have things that we know ahead of time exist in this world. Like, how does the world exist? What has happened that got it to this point? What are some of the themes that we are going to focus on? And then once we had decided like what the ground rules for the universe were, and this was a collaborative process that we did through basically Google Docs. This is way back when, so it was like the very first iteration of Google Docs, right? So we're commuting back and forth on that. And so when we got all the ground rules sort of figured out, we all started writing, or they started writing. I actually held back as the editor to be sort of refereeing, and also, as I say in my intro, to be the spackle. Like when they were done with their stories, I looked and like, what's missing, and I would write the story that would sort of be that bit of spackle. But what was really cool about that is normally when someone writes, they go and they write in their whole, right, and then the finished product comes out. Well, what we all did, or what they did, and then what I was doing involving as the editor, was we were showing each other work as we were writing it. And so themes or really cool ideas that one person would be thinking up would be plucked and incorporated in another story. For example, there's a sort of private security company in there, right? And I believe it was Tobias Buckle that figured out put that in first. And everybody was like, ooh, we could use that. And then everybody else picked it up and started using it in theirs as well. And that was really kind of cool because that I was the editor. And so I had to, encourage people and, problem solve when they got themselves into a corner and so on and so forth. But most of what I was doing was just making sure that everybody saw everything, and that collaboration was happening at a much earlier process level than it might otherwise in a similar anthology, where you would have one story and if someone else would play off that story and someone else would play off that story and so on and so forth. So it was a really interesting collaborative experience that I think overall everybody was happy with. It got nominated for a Hugo. It got nominated for an Audie, I believe, as well. And it overall did very well for Audible, which was the original publisher of it, because it was an audiobook series first. And it was all the narrators for that. This was a great bit of cross promotion. All the narrators for the audiobook were cast members of Battlestar Galactica.
What?
So, yes.
No
yes.
way. Okay. Wow. Geez.
Yeah. So
I gotta stop reading and start listening.
Definitely worth the definitely worth the listen as well. And then the Subterranean Press limited edition came out, and then the version that you have is a Tor edition, which came out after that. It was a great process, and it was fun to work with those specific people, Eber and Tobias and Jay and Carl, because everybody's so very smart, but they're also very different writers, right? And to have them all have that common theme, so there's a commonality in all that we're doing, but to have all those different styles, because Jay Lake is very different from Eber, is very different from Carl, is very different from Toby, and just have it all still fit together in the same world was really kind of cool.
Amazing. Super cool.
Congratulations on the Kaiju Preservation Society. I'd like to sing it in the Kinks tune, but I won't, because you've probably heard that before.
Yeah, from my editor, but yes, definitely.
But yeah, congratulations, and we love it, and thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yep. Hope to talk to you again.
Good night.
Thank you for listening in today. We really hope you enjoyed this episode with John Scalzi. What a cool guy. That was a lot of fun. Maybe next time we can talk more about music. Is that okay to talk about music on a podcast about books? I hope so. Thank you so much. Again, rate us wherever you listen to your podcast. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much, everybody. Until next time.